today's video is one I didn't know if I'd end up making, because the book that I read for today's video, I didn't know if I was going to finish. Definitely not the worst thing I've ever read, but also enough frustrating things in it for my reading that I put it away for like several weeks, and I was like, I don't know that I'm gonna finish this because I'm just so frustrated with some of the writing style that's going on. But here we are. I finished it. If you're wondering, the book that I read was the Point Muse Cozy Mystery number 0, The Pernicious Pixie and the Choked Word. Quite a mouthful. But yeah, so I found this Point Muse Cozy Mystery series through Kindle Unlimited. I also actually bought the number 1 book before realizing there was a number 0 book on Kindle Unlimited. And I think I got originally the second one also on Kindle Unlimited. But after the struggles I had reading number 0, I returned book number 2 in Kindle Unlimited because I'm definitely not going to make it that far. And I still have book 1 since I bought it. But I don't know that I'm going to read that one either, because again, I had a lot of frustrations with this book. So let's get into that, I guess. So this was a mystery, which normally I really like, which is part of why I was interested in it and got it in the first place. It involves magic and things, which is kind of fun and kind of different. It's got sort of like urban fantasy to it, but not super dark urban fantasy. It's really lighthearted overall. Other than, I guess, that there's murders in it, so that's kind of darker material. But overall, it's not like a dark, grungy city. It takes place on a college campus. So, brighter, more cheerful, younger people, whatever. All of that, which, again, could have been an interesting setup. But throughout the story, until about 75% of the way in, based on the percentage that my Kindle Unlimited app gave me, it was very unclear if our main character, Zandy, actually knew about magic or not. There were times when things would come up like, oh, someone wanted to research death curses, because she works at a library, so she's kind of like a research assistant that way. And someone comes up and is like, death curses, tell me about them. And she's like, oh, here's information about death curses. So that, that she's willing to just pass off information like that. Feels like, okay, she knows about magic. But then magical things start happening. Things like hearing the term non-human causes her to shudder and freak out a little bit. She mentions at one point that it sounds strange to be talking about hexes and witches as if this was not originally part of her everyday life. But she also had a great aunt who died and left her Point Muse, which is just some sort of estate that doesn't actually come up in this book. Throughout the book, she's encouraged by this special agent dude, go to Point Muse, find out your history, and that's the only reference we get to it the whole time, and it was really frustrating because I wanted to see Point Muse if it's going to be this big a deal. But anyway, so we've got kind of that set up, and she remembers staying with this great aunt when she was a child, and she feels like she remembers magic from then, so that kind of implies that she knew that there was magic, except for since she was a kid, she doesn't know if it was real. And then, yeah, finally, 75% of the way into the book, she's talking to the special agent dude who's been helping her investigate things, and she says that I didn't know magic existed before this all started happening, and he's like, go to Point Muse, it'll tell you everything. If she didn't know that magic was real, why was she okay being like, oh yeah, here's death curses, this is a real easy thing? Or when the pixie glitter stuff, which they call sparkle and ends up being like a magical drug, shows up, why is she not like more than just, but this is glitter? Why is she like, oh, it's just glitter. Glitter won't make you have drug hallucinations or whatever, There's so many magical things that come up throughout the story that if she hadn't ever experienced them before, why is she so blasé about them? I don't get it. I was very frustrated. Very frustrated. And there were just so many times that I was like, decide if she knows or not, because it feels like you don't know if she knows or not. And her character is very frustrating because it seems like she should be responding differently to it if she does know, and responding differently to it if she didn't know. And this whole blasé thing is really annoying. Really annoying. Also, there were excessive amounts of description in this book. Excessive. When we first open up the story, she starts describing her father, and there are at least like 3 paragraphs of just straight description about her father, in his appearance, and his personality, all that kind of thing. And later on, she does back off on it a little bit, and it's more just sprinkled in the story. But oh my gosh, I don't need 3 paragraphs right up front about the father. You can sprinkle these things in later. Cool, you know? If he's like an anal retentive organized guy, which gets repeated multiple times throughout the story, just say that once, or just show it throughout the book. I don't need your 3 paragraphs of description. You know, it was too much for me. And then, as I referenced earlier, there's this like secret agent / FBI detective who's like working with her. Well, not exactly working with her. He doesn't want her involved, but she gets involved. And so they end up kind of working together. And when she describes him, she describes him as very like handsome and attractive, and then has this silly phrase, so why was she still suspicious of him? As if, you know, only unattractive people are suspicious people, and he did end up being useful and someone she shouldn't have been suspicious of. But I was just like, oh my gosh. Just some of the writing in this was very frustrating. And then we get towards the end. I'm gonna just jump into spoilery stuff. Throughout the whole story, she's been kind of tracking this Simone DeVoe lady who is like the girlfriend of the guy who was originally killed. And so she thinks it's the Simone lady. And she's super, super convinced it's the Simone lady. One of her friends ends up getting kidnapped, and her dad ends up getting kidnapped. And the killer like blackmails her and is like, you've got this notebook of mine, if you want to see your father and your friend again, come by yourself and we'll do a swapsy. Which, traditionally-ish, I guess, for this kind of story, for some mysteries, it works in that way. But she hears like this maniacal laughter on the phone, and she's like, this seems so familiar. Who is this person? And immediately is like, oh yeah, of course, it's Simone. It's Simone's laugh. And then we get the reveal, which of course it's not Simone, because it's never the person that they're super convinced that it is. And it's just like, how did you not see this? I mean, to be fair, the person who ends up being the killer is the father's like research assistant helping him write his memoirs or something. And so she's just kind of always in the background, was one of those perfect, like, this person's suspicious by just sort of being around kind of characters. And so, like, in that sense, especially once the laugh came up, I was like, oh, it's Marion. It's the research assistant. But then when, like, the full reveal comes around, Marion's like, oh my gosh, Sandy, you're an idiot. You had this notebook that shows all these traits of pixies, and I am a pixie. And I was like, oh, I missed that part of it, but I did get that she was the one, so kudos for that, I guess. But, yeah, some of it, and it just felt like the plotting was kind of there and kind of not, because I don't think that we got the same clues that were referenced at the end, where Marion's like, oh, here are all these pixie traits that you should have gotten from the notebook. But I don't feel like we as the readers got those traits either, so I mean, I know it talked about pixies early on, so maybe I just forgot the details that it described, but I feel like we weren't given quite enough in some of it, too. So, anyways, that's kind of my ranty, reviewy thoughts about this. Oh, one other just kind of random note that I want to talk about. So she works in a library, which traditionally libraries have, like, wooden shelves. Every library I've been to has wooden shelves, especially, like, public places, they generally do. I guess there are sometimes, like, the metal ones, like, up along the walls, especially for, like, CDs and DVDs. That seems to be more where you get, like, the metal ones. But in the middle of the story, Zandy gets hexed by Simone because Simone is mad that Zandy's been investigating her. And as part of the hex that happens to Zandy, she ends up knocking over some bookcases, and they go down with like a metallic explosion, is how it was described. And I was like, I was not picturing this library with metallic shelves. After all that excessive description of the father, maybe you should have spent some time describing the shelves in the library, so this seemed believable to me. Also, the fact that Xandy gets hexed, and then it's just like, oh, well, I've got some bad luck now, versus if you've never been involved in this magical world and you're suddenly hexed, I feel like you'd freak out a little bit more about the whole thing. And not be so blasé about, oh, look, these squirrels are now throwing nuts at me and attacking me. I had some issues with it. So I don't know that I'll be reading the next book, even though I bought it. I'm pretty sure I only paid a couple dollars for it anyway, so it's not the end of the world. And it's only an electronic version, so it's not like it's clogging up my shelves or anything. But, oh my gosh, what is this series? And why make such a fuss, again, about the Point Muse thing, if you're not even going to involve Point Muse in here? My guess, especially since this ends up being called Mystery Zero, is that it's technically a prequel, and they'd probably written, like, maybe 1 and 2 beforehand, and then we're like, oh, here's, like, the origin story, which, especially the way the book ended, with her being magicked into forgetting all the events of the story, makes it seem like, here, we got a fun adventure before book 1, but also we've retconned her remembering it so that book 1 can still happen the way it happened. And, I don't know. I wish I could have seen Point Muse instead of it just being a constant thing from the secret agent, like, go to Point Muse, go to Point Muse, go to Point Muse. And she's, like, curious about it the whole time and wondering about this magical heritage, so why wouldn't she actually go investigate it sometime in the story? I mean, I don't know where Point Muse is, to be fair, in comparison to where the story takes place, but that's something they could have described if nothing else. So, again, a little frustrated by this book. And again, not the worst thing I've ever read, but those were the issues that I had with it and why I didn't know if I was going to finish it. But I did finish it, and now here's my ranty review of it. If you want to check it out for yourself, again, this was Point Muse Cozy Mystery number 0, and the title of it for, like, the volume is The Pernicious Pixie and the Choked Word. And there's a whole series after it, too, if you end up liking it or really like the idea of this magical mystery series. I think I'll try to find something else for my magical mystery fix. If you have any recommendations, feel free to share them down below. But that's all I've got to say for now. This is the Umlaut Harper, signing out.